Welcome back to our safety behaviour module. Today we're looking at, now we know what they are, how do we actually begin to change them safely? We have two ways. The first one is something called behavioural experiments, which we're going to go through today, and the second is called habituation and exposure. Both of these target reducing the fear brain's response, but behavioural experiments are a little bit better for belief testing, whereas habituation and exposure, I would say, are better for when you are physically avoiding things, and that is your main safety behaviour. I'd encourage you to watch this module, but if you're someone whose main coping mechanism is total physical avoidance, you may find that habituation and exposure might be a better technique for you than behavioural experiments. So there's no absolute right and wrong here, you can mix as you go. But we will go into both in detail. Both techniques are going to bring anxiety down over time. So on the left here, we've got our safety behavior graph. Every time we do a safety behavior, including physical avoidance, our anxiety is actually going up in the long run. Both behavioral experiments and habituation are working to actually bring our anxiety down over time when we don't do safety behaviors. But we need to tackle this gradually because going too far too soon can be counterproductive and often increase our anxiety. Today, we're going to look at behavioural experiments. So what are they? They are structured activities or experiments to test our anxious predictions about what actually happens when we drop our safety behaviours. So they help challenge those beliefs that the fear brain holds. So at one time, we probably had a belief, if I make a mistake, people think I'm incompetent, but maybe we didn't believe it that much, maybe 10%. But over time, each time we've engaged in a safety behavior, the belief level has been going up and up and up. And most people I work with, when they ask how they truly feel in the moment, not logically how they feel, in the moment of a socially anxious situation, how much do they feel that their belief might be true, such as this one, people think I'm incompetent, it's high. It's normally around 75% or higher. And that's understandable because that's going to trigger anxiety. Now, the way behavioural experiments work is that by continuous testing of whether this is actually true, we begin to bring our belief level down. Now, you can see here we didn't actually get down to 0, and this is something I'm going to come to later in the module because there's a reason for that. So how do you set up your own experiment? Well, you've already done step 1, which is identifying your predictions. So most likely with your safety behaviors, you may have noticed that the feared outcome is actually a prediction about what might happen. So for example here, if I make a mistake when speaking, people will think I'm stupid. So maybe my safety behavior is read off a script the whole time so that it's impossible I can make a mistake. Then we need to set up an experiment. So we're designing an experiment to begin to test out this behavior. Step 3 is conducting it, and step 4 is evaluating it and seeing what actually happened and re-rating your beliefs. So let's go through an experiment to see how this might work. So my prediction is if I make mistakes, people will think I'm incompetent with a 90% belief level. So instead of reading off a script, I'm actually going to do the opposite. I'm going to do my presentation and I'm going to purposefully make a mistake. So I'm going to say something factually incorrect and just correct myself so that people are aware I made a mistake. But how am I actually going to know that anyone thinks I'm incompetent? Well, I might monitor facial expressions, notice if anyone's going like this or making a note, or she made a mistake. I'm not going to point it out when I'm speaking other than correcting it. But I'm not going to say, sorry, I made a mistake or anything like that. And then I'm going to get overall feedback about my presentation. What did people think? So I can grasp, does anybody actually think I'm incompetent? Then, once we've conducted the experiment, step 3, we want to move on to step 4, the outcome. What actually happened? So no one mentioned it when I asked for feedback. Overall, people said my presentation was useful. I didn't notice any facial expressions. So my key learning from this is that people don't really pay attention to these things. So I re-rate my belief. It's come down to about 70%. That's how it's feeling, and that's okay. We do not need to make huge jumps down, and it might be that it doesn't even shift at all the first few times you do this, even though you can logically see that it should. It may not always, and that's okay. When we think about the evolution of the fear brain, it shouldn't easily shift just from different experiences. Otherwise, we would never be able to consistently know what's safe or not. So it is slow to shift, and that's completely normal. But the more you repeat it, the belief level will begin to shift. So the more we do this, and maybe we even take it a little bit further each time, or maybe we just repeat the experiment over and over again, we begin to shift that belief level until it's coming all the way down. Because having the thought is completely normal. If I'm doing something, I might worry about coming across incompetent. But if I only feel like there's a 5% chance of that happening, that's very different to feeling like it's a 75% chance. Now, as you can see, we've not gone down to 0, and that's appropriate. It's not about having no belief, because sometimes these things might be true. Some highly judgmental people may think you're incompetent when you've made a mistake, but the difference is they are the exception, not the norm, and we want our belief level to reflect that. Those experiences are the exception, they're not the norm, and they also don't mean anything about us. Often that's more to do with those people's high standards and then projecting onto you. But we're not looking necessarily for 0%. We could get there, but if we don't, it's absolutely fine. What we're looking for is a belief level where we're feeling safe. So here's a slightly different example. So let's say normally when I present, I would have my camera off and only use voice. Because the reason for doing so, I'm worried, is that people will be able to see my hands shaking in the camera. So my safety behavior is no camera, but I'm still here. I'm not completely physically avoiding the situation. So my experiment is going to be have my camera on. But how will I know if people can see my hands shaking? Well, I'm not going to monitor my hands. I'm not going to sit on them or anything like that. And I'm also going to record the meeting so that I can actually see after I've done it, how visible were my hands shaking, and then get overall feedback about my presentation. So I'm really exposing myself to this prediction. So once I've conducted the experiment, filling out the outcome, no one mentioned it, I can even notice my own hand shaking in the recording. So my key learning is that I don't need to control my hands because it's actually unnoticeable even though they were shaking. I can keep my camera on. Now here my belief has come quite down significantly because the visual of seeing the recording where I can't even see my own hands shaking has been so strong and so effective for my fear brain. So we may notice some bigger shifts depending on what we use to actually check whether our prediction was true or not. I'd encourage you to get creative with it. How will you know whether your prediction has happened or not? So for your experiment, identify a behaviour from your list of safety behaviours to begin to challenge. Now, I've said not avoidance here, and what I mean by that is total physical avoidance. Now, you can still do a safety behaviour on total physical avoidance. It's just you may find that exposure and habituation, the second technique we're going to look at, is more helpful for you if your main problem is total physical avoidance. But that doesn't mean you can't do it with a behavioural experiment. And in therapy, we would use both. I've just separated them out like this for an ease of understanding in a course format. Use the worksheet with the lesson to set up one behavioural experiment for you, so whether that's on anxiety management, impression management, or avoidance, as you would like. And really try to identify what your predictions are and how you're going to test them out. Just start with one and maybe pick something that feels, if we're thinking of 0 to 10 as an anxiety scale, with 0 no anxiety, 10 extreme, pick something that's maybe around the middle to do so that you're not pushing yourself too far too soon. Now, it can go wrong, but what's helpful in that? So let's say I actually watched my video and I could see my hand shaking. What's helpful in that is that even though the worst case scenario happened or my prediction happened, I could cope with it. Everything was kind of fine. It wasn't nice, but it was fine. And that's important because our fear brain's going to take in, even when my worst prediction happened, I am still safe and I could cope. And that is still going to be really helpful for reducing anxiety. So it's not about things always going right. They can go wrong. And that can sometimes even be more beneficial because we can see even in the extreme scenarios, we are safe and we could cope. Plus, when you're doing this, keep practicing external focus because that's already reducing safety behaviours in the sense of keeping your focus internal and going to bring you more into the present moment. So all these skills need to be used together. So good luck with it. Take some time to set up a behavioural experiment for you, and there's all the forms and instructions below the lesson. And as I said, if you're somebody who more wants to overcome physical avoidance, before you set a behavioural experiment up, you may want to watch the next module first and then decide about what technique you would like to use.